You are listening to Vote Her In, a collaboration between Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive. Today's guest is Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx.
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly, and you are listening to the Vote Her In podcast that is a collaboration between Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive. We started about a year ago to look at the movement to elect our first woman president. Unfortunately, this is the first episode since we've known that barring unforeseen things happening, we are unlikely to be electing a woman president in 2020, but there is still, of course, a hope for a woman vice president, lots of governors, and the work continues. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Rebecca, who will introduce our guest. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Kelly, and hi to everyone out there. I'm sitting here with Kim Foxx, and in a minute I'm going to tell you a little bit more. But apropos of what Kelly was just saying, I wanted to sort of put some context here. We're actually on the day when Senator Warren withdrew from running for president, and as I was reflecting on it between my tears, I have to say, for the loss of these four amazing women, I was remembering that, when I sat down to write the book Vote Her In, which is about electing a woman president, two things. One is the book was all about the sort of underlying context is getting more women into executive office. We've had some success, a fair amount of success with women in legislative positions. We're moving incrementally and along that path, but this has been much harder, as we all know. And for instance, there are very few state's attorneys around the country who are women, much less African-American women. And so here we are, and we are still in this Vote Her In campaign together, all hands across America on voting every woman in that we can. And I think working particularly hard to elect women to executive office, which brings me to our guest today, Kim Foxx. A dear friend, a wonderful person, a brilliant woman, and I interviewed her for the book, actually, and we talked about this idea of both a woman running for president and the view that a woman executive can have, the things she can do in the position like the one that Kim has. So we are going to talk today about her work and her look ahead. She's in a campaign right now for re-election as the state's attorney of Cook County, which, for those of you who may not know, includes the city of Chicago, the third largest city in the country. But we thought that we would start out by asking Kim to share with us some of her thoughts about this campaign to elect a woman president and how we should look ahead. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you for having me. I'm devastated, if I'm being honest. I think it's a day that feels almost like a reminder of where we stand. Right? I think for all the confidence that we have about our abilities and what we can accomplish and all of the work that we have done over the years, and while we celebrate, suffrage and look how far we've come, it was like a door hitting me in the face of, no, not this far. You'll only get as far as we let you. And to see so many talented, thoughtful, brilliant women who were more than capable of becoming our president, just summarily dismissed, and just in not in even dramatic fashion. Just it's almost like this subtle picking off of you're not electable. We're going to find every reason to say why we don't like you that we can't articulate, why you just aren't our choice. Till you take every opportunity away to have a path. And so I think in political terms where I say that our path narrowed, it was more, it felt more like all of our paths just continued to narrow. That's what it felt like. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. And as we look ahead and on this point, and I had said earlier that we wanted to really focus on what it is that women in executive office can do. for you, your primary focus has been on criminal justice, obviously, as a state's attorney. And I know that Kelly is going to ask you more about this, but if you could just begin with sharing with us and our listeners, the approach you've taken, why you think it's the right one, why you think it may be applicable to other parts of the country where other women are running for this office or holding this office.
The approach I've taken on policy has been very much rooted in my experiences growing up in the city. I grew up in one of the most notorious public housing complexes, raised by two women, my mother and my grandmother. And so I've had an opportunity as a survivor of sexual assault to someone who watched my mother be a victim of domestic violence to see kind of the aspects of our criminal justice system up front. And wanting to have this job to bring that perspective to bear, not just as a woman, as a Black woman, but as one who is more likely to end up in our criminal justice system than to lead it. And to have an agenda that saw the people who use our justice system not as good guys, bad guys, but really as a summation of a lot of failed policies where they were, emblematic of that. And so I've tried to take an approach of what keeps communities safe, because at the end of the day, that's my number one priority. I remember seeking shelter in bathtubs, not being able to go out and play because of gun violence. So that's what I want. I want kids to be able to play. I want our elders to be able to garden. I want communities to be healthy, safe, and thriving. And in that, what should we not be doing that isn't in furtherance of that? How are we criminalizing poverty? How are we using the immense power of the prosecutor's office to not do good, but rather to cause harm? I don't want to cause harm. I want to keep communities safe.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's an especially important message right now for people to think about, that there are offices, everyone's so focused on the presidency, but there are offices besides the presidency that can have such dramatic effect on communities and making progressive change. And you've been able to do some really amazing things in your tenure so far. What are some of your goals moving forward in your next term that you would like to accomplish?
In the next term, I want to continue with the theme of using our justice system to promote safety and not use it as a catch-all for failed social policies. So one of the things that we are reckoning with is we have a significant number of cases that come to our office related to drugs and mental health. And there is a universal acceptance that the criminal justice system should not be a mental health provider, should not be a substance use disorder provider. And yet 40% of the cases that come to my office are drug cases. And of that 40%, 60% of them are possession. We have a real public health crisis around substance use disorder, illuminated even more so in the last couple of years related to opioid use and addiction. And yet our response has been punitive. And yet we use the rhetoric of, public health, but use criminal justice as a response. And so for me, the next term is about how do we appropriately use the weight of the system? How do I use my position as an executive to be a convener for those outside of the justice system to step up and lead in areas around mental health and substance use disorder to get the state's attorney's office out of the business of dealing with these issues in the justice system and deal with them in community where they belong.
Are there other issues? I know there's been a lot on your plate over the last several years in this job, but can you talk a bit about the work you've done on women who are in the criminal justice system?
Yeah, the women in the criminal justice system is deeply personal to me. When we look at the girls who come through our detention center and the women in our adult system, studies have found that somewhere between 60 and 70% of them have been survivors of some type of sexual abuse or trauma. We have a number of them who've been survivors of domestic violence. And this unmet trauma, or their need for resources, often find women engaged in behaviors or engaged in relationships or engaged in situations that have them in our justice system. And because I've had that lived experience, and I feel very thankful that I had not ended up in our justice system, there's a real intentionality with me of how do we look at these women in the whole, a real, what are the needs that they have? How do we make sure, because these are many of them are mothers, and it's incredibly disruptive when we put mothers into our jails. As part of these policies around bail reform, what we were finding is women were far more likely to sit and languish because of inability to pay than men. A man gets arrested, goes to jail. A woman will find a way to get that money to get him out. A woman goes to jail and she sits. And so, what does that then do to a mother who has a child at home? What does that do to a mother who's an hourly worker? And so a lot of our policies have directly been towards making sure that population is seen, because the disproportionate impact on women in the justice system is far greater than it is for men. And how they get to the system is dramatically different. Everyone has trauma, which isn't to negate men's trauma, but the prevalence of sexual abuse in the lives of the women who come through our system and what that turns into, I'm keenly focused on.
All right.
There are a lot of women who listen to this podcast who have run for office or are thinking about running for office, but not as many who've run for executive office and have faced the particular challenges of that. Do you have advice, suggestions, things that you would recommend that they do or think about as they look toward offices like that?
Gird up. I think you got to gird up. I have to cheerlead that we need to do this, as daunting as it is and as heartbreaking as days like today with Elizabeth Warren. It absolutely matters that we're in these roles and that we take these roles unapologetic about the lens that we have, because I believe in that policy, good policy, with the focus of women, of being a woman, lifts us all. And so what I would say is run a path that is unapologetically authentic to what it means to be a woman doing this work. I've said it far too often. I've seen women try to emulate men when running for these jobs, or emulate men when they get these jobs, as though they don't want to be too disruptive. Our mere presence is disruption. Our mere presence is disruption. The presence of these women in the presidential election was disruptive, which is why there was this concerted effort to get them out. This wasn't because they weren't electable. This wasn't because they weren't brilliant. This wasn't because they weren't accomplished. There were people who outlasted a number of these candidates who were far less accomplished, far less innovative and thoughtful. But because they were there, they were disruptive. And so my encouragement to women is don't be daunted. I mean, really, we have to gird up and know that the punches will come. But there is absolutely a deprivation of brilliance when we take ourselves out of the game. And our communities suffer for it. I think we suffer when we don't have women in these roles.
And speaking of that, specifically in the role of a state's attorney, of a county attorney, for instance, both Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar were, like you, prosecutors. Can you talk for a minute about what you think, how women approach that role and why we should value women in that role?
I think women see bigger pictures. I think women can look at the totality of a circumstance and not just a moment. For me, again, looking at the bail system, I think of what is it that someone has to do to pay? What are they giving up to pay? If my constituency is largely poor, every dollar that we're talking about has an impact on decisions on whether you're going to be able to pay a bill, buy groceries. What does childcare play into this? I just think about the things in my daily life where every dollar is accounted for. Because people are counting on me. And women bring that perspective of this more of a holistic approach of where do things fit in the puzzle, whereas opposed to I've seen men who just, I see this piece of the puzzle, I'm going to focus on this piece and not think more broad, not think more holistically. I knew Senator Harris, know Senator Harris. She's been a mentor to me when I first came into this office. And she took a different approach to prosecution. She was getting beat up about being a prosecutor in the presidential, which was also fascinating to me. Because years ago, when men were prosecutors and ran for higher office, they could absolutely tout, I was a prosecutor, and people loved it. You were tough. You were going to keep our community safe. A woman runs for prosecutor, she's a cop. There's somehow something suspicious about the fact that these women were prosecutors. Where just 2 years ago, a man, or even, I believe if a man was a prosecutor now, wouldn't be viewed the same. But I think women doing those roles that are largely dominated by men, 79% of elected prosecutors in this country are white men. 16% white women, less than 1% women of color, to be able to do this work and recognize all of the disparities, whether racial or gender, and then do something about it will draw attack. But we won't be able to do the innovative things that we've been able to do if we don't step up to do it.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about these attacks that you face, and it's true. I'm sure you're aware that on some of the bus stops around the city, there are, signs plastered up about you. And, you face all of this on a daily basis. You face all of these challenges. How do you keep going? What do you do to keep yourself grounded, keep yourself in the work, and keep going?
I view it like a relay race. I view it like there were women before me who have started this race long before it was my turn to have my hand out. And as difficult as times are for me, I can't imagine what it was like 100 years ago or 150 years ago. The fact that I'm positioned to be a lawyer, to run for office, is because there were women who faced daunting circumstances before me who kept going. And when you put your hand out to take the baton, you take it with the knowledge that you have to keep running to get it to the person behind you. That it is not enough to say, well, this is hard. I guess we're never going to get there, because we have made progress. We absolutely have made progress. It is not as swift as I think we would want it to be, but we're far better than where we were. I have 4 teenage girls at home who are watching me go through this and say to me all the time, why do you do it? Why do you do it? And I used to be reluctant to own what this experience is like as a woman and as a woman of color. And I didn't want to give that to them. I didn't want to say to them that this is what it is, because I didn't want to scare them. I didn't want to be that person to be the boogeyman of, you're going to go out into the world and people are going to question your competency. People are not going to like the things that you do, but it won't be about the decision. It'll be about the decision maker, because I don't want to crush that for them. But then there are days like today, or the things that I've been going through recently, that I feel brutal honesty with this generation of girls who are very much like, how dare they? Mm-hmm. How dare they? With each generation, there's a growing confidence. With each generation, we are getting faster and stronger in that relay, that it does them no service to pretend like the things that are happening to me are not because of misogyny or racism. What's happened to Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar and Kamala, like, this is not because these women failed. The system was working against them. I tell my daughters that so that they can start figuring out their tactics and their plans to take this down, to take it down. And if we leave them in ignorance about what it looks like, then they will believe that this is on them, right? That it's their failing. And so that's how I keep going, is that there were women who kept going for me. Mm-hmm. It's my time on the relay, and I got to pass this baton to the next one.
And on that inspiring note, we want to thank Kim Foxx, hoping that she will continue, no doubt that she will, as State's Attorney of Cook County, and helping us have a better city. And also wanted to just say, for those of you who are listening, that The note that Kim was just making about passing the baton, we've really worked hard, and you'll see this as you listen to the podcast over the next couple of months, to invite some amazing guests who can talk from various points on the relay about what we're facing today and what we're going to be doing next. So I hope you all will keep joining us, and thank you.
Yes, thank you.
The Vote Her In segment is a collaboration of Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive. Our theme song is called Are You Listening, off of the album Elephant-Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.